Good morning, we're here on 12 Nuns Nursery.
With some 9 centimetre Harvington Hellebores. And we're looking at them with a view to potting them on. When we send the plants to you from 12 Nuns, we don't send them to you in a plastic pot. We transfer them out of a plastic pot and into a wool pot. What do we think of this one, Dad?
The leaves are nice and green, which is a very good sign indeed.
Yep.
And if I look at the root ball itself, I'm quite excited because I can see some wonderful roots developing. The roots have tended to grow round in a very
They
tight,
have. This one's
way.
even more so. Yeah.
So one of the things we might consider doing before we pot it on is to try and tease the roots out a little bit, so that when they're in their new environment, they will be able to spread more naturally than they would otherwise do.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you can see as I hold this plant, the roots are capable of being spread out quite a long way, and that's all for the good of the plant. If you damage one or two of the roots in that process, don't fret about it. The plant is quite capable of looking after itself, and that plant is now ready for potting. This is a clay pot, and in the pot itself we've arranged some very coarse material in the bottom. Any coarse material will do to help facilitate drainage. Hellebores do not want to stand in a soggy, wet pot. Any excess water in the pot needs to drain away in order to create a healthy root environment.
So we've got some crocks at the bottom here. So in this example, just over the base of the pot. And we might also use some of this coarse bark just to fill in the gaps. That also serves another purpose, which is not to, when you fill up the pot with finer compost, that'll all come shooting straight out the bottom of your holes at the bottom of the pot. So it's hugely valuable, isn't it, in the sense that you don't end up with a whole lot of compost on your patio.
This is peat-free compost. In other words, it's organic, but it's peat-free, just as you can find in any garden centre. But in this particular sample, we've got some little blue pellets, which I believe are fertiliser pellets.
They're called controlled release fertiliser. And what it does is it gradually releases some fertiliser into the compost that you're potting the plant into. So as the plant establishes, even though you're watering it regularly and some of the feed gets used by the plant, some of it goes out the bottom of the pot, there's still some gradual release of that fertiliser into the pot.
Some of our viewers might be saying, well, where do we get that sort of stuff from?
Yep.
So from one of our local garden centres, I found this stuff. It's called Boost, and they claim that this has multi-action and provides food for plants for up to 6 months. So here we've got the compost, and assuming for a few moments there's no controlled release fertiliser in there, we might want to take a few of these pellets and scatter them in the compost, mix the compost up, and we then know that we've got not only the compost in there, but a certain amount of plant food as well. You've got to remember that hellebores need a rich growing environment. The richer the environment, the more flowers you'll get. The other thing that we might want to add to the compost is something called bone meal. Now, bone meal, as the name suggests, is made of ground up animal bone. It's sterilised, so it's perfectly safe to use, and I will take a small handful of that and I'll scatter it on this compost like so. And because it's organic and because it doesn't contain excessively high levels of food, it can be used quite generously.
Yes. There will be on the side of the packet, there will be an advisory about how many tablespoons or how many teaspoons, or it might have a measuring spoon. So do read the labels, but this one is perfectly safe. Whereas perhaps with the controlled release fertilizers, those little balls that we just looked at, you might want to be a little bit more cautious with that and really look at the measurement to volume of compost that you're mixing that into.
We now have the compost ready for use, and we can pop that in the pot. We're potting a plant that's been in a 9 centimetre pot. We need the plant to be about 2 or 3 centimetres below the rim of the pot. What it is useful to do is to use that pot as a guide. So if we put the pot in the compost and check that the pot level is below the rim of the new pot, it's a helpful guide. So we've now put a depression in our compost ready to receive the 9 centimetre pot. That sits in there perfectly.
It does.
And all we need to do is to feed the compost around the plant. It's very important to have it firm, so do press it in firmly, and a few taps like that will settle the compost, and we shall have a plant that is perfectly happy.
We need to just be very conscious about the crown of the plant, and we mustn't bury the crown because they become quite vulnerable to rot.
So the crown of the plant is where the leaves are emerging from the roots. Okay. The only thing that remains to be done now is to make sure the plant is watered in.
And the importance of that is to take the fines of the compost, so the fine material in the compost, around those roots that we were looking at. And so having teased out those roots, if we don't water it in well, the compost, the fine material in the compost won't tuck in around those roots. And if you do that right, it's amazing how much more quickly your plant will establish. Don't rely on the rain. Even on a rainy day, we water plants in on the nursery.